Hi, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Aquarium Online Academy programs. My name is Sergio. I work here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. Thank you for joining us. We're an aquarium here in Long Beach, California. Maybe you've been before with family, with your school groups. But if you've never been before, don't worry, because today we get the opportunity to actually talk to you wherever you are live. So this program right now is live. I am actually right here in our studio. I'm joined by my friend Lynette. Now, you probably won't see her, but all of the things happening behind me, this magic screen going on, you're going to see a lot of different pictures and videos about the animals we're going to talk about today. And when those things switch, that's going to be with the help from my friend Lynette. Also, one of the other things that Lynette will be helping with is, because this is a live program, that also means that we get to communicate live. So if there's something that you want to say, if you want to respond to one of my questions, or even better, if you have a question for me that you want me to respond to, well, then you can actually text us at that number that you see right below me, and Lynette will be able to see those questions. She'll either give you an answer, or she'll tell them to me if I have time, and then I can answer them as well here live on camera. And so that number is going to be 562 286 1838. So just go ahead and text that number. Make sure you have a parent or an adult's approval to do that. And if you're watching at a later time, so maybe you're not watching this right now, 9 a.m. on April 30th, Tuesday morning, last day of April, and that's okay. You can still send us questions, and we will do our best to respond to those. But instead of texting us, you're going to be using that email that you see underneath that underneath that phone number. So it's live@lbaop.org. So if you email a question to that email address at any time, we'll do our best to respond when we are able to see it. But those are the ways that you can communicate with us, okay? And I really hope that you take those opportunities, because as much as I love talking, it's even better when I get to have a conversation with you all at home. All right. Well, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get our program started here today, because in my opinion, these are some of the best animals on the planet, but definitely here at the aquarium as well. We're going to be talking about all sorts of, well, let's see, you could tell me what's the title of this video? Did you just click on it randomly? Well, it's about birds. So we're going to be talking a lot about birds. We're going to be talking mostly about things like shorebirds or wetland birds. Those are usually birds that are going to live by the ocean or by a source of water. And, well, that's because we work at an aquarium. So those are the animals that we're focused on. But hopefully the things that you learn here will help you be able to, or you can apply that knowledge out in the world around you when you see birds like hawks, or maybe an eagle or something like that, or even just a seagull or a simple pigeon, right? Because we're going to learn that they may all be a little bit different, but they still have some key things in common, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just walk off screen, and I'm going to ask Lynette to put up a video, one of our highlight reels from one of my favorite birds that we have here at the aquarium. That's right, these are, what are they? Drum roll. Penguins. That's right, they're penguins. They are awesome. They're very fun, very adorable, lots of personality. But now here we have our highlight reel. That just means that these were already recorded, but they're some of the best videos that we have of our penguins, and you can see some of the things going on here. And what I want us to do is I want us to just take a few seconds. Now the video might change from one kind of highlight to another, and that's okay. I want you to, though, if it does change, I just want you to make some observations and maybe even see what is the same, what's different between the penguins. If the video changes, do they look completely different? Do they look the same? Are they doing similar behavior still? Oh, look at these penguins. They're communicating. It's awesome. But just make some observations about these animals, because today, well, really every day, you are a scientist, and I want you to use that scientist mindset here with us now. That just means making observations, making guesses, and asking questions. So you might ask yourself, why is that bird like scratching itself so much? Is it really itchy? Then maybe you could even form a theory. I think, yeah, maybe it is really itchy. Maybe it has allergies. Ooh, that could be it. Or you might think, maybe they're trying to groom themselves. I don't know. But go ahead and make those observations. I'll go ahead and give you about 30 seconds to just make some observations on these animals. Also, try to notice or try to think about what 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 do these birds have in common with other birds that you might know about, and what's different, right? Because like I said, birds are all different. All right, friends. Well, remember, if there's any of those observations, thoughts, theories, opinions, or just comments that you want to share, you can always text them into that number 562-286-1838. But now I'm going to go ahead and walk on over right next to our little penguin here. And I want to hear from you. What were some of the observations that we made about these birds? First off, was there anything that they have in common with other birds? Because I'm going to ask you guys, let's see if we can figure out what makes a bird, right? There's a lot of different kinds of animals out there, but if you saw a snake, a slithery little snake out in the grass, would you think that that was a bird? Probably not, right? And how do you know that? How do you know that an animal's not a bird or not another animal? Well, there's some key characteristics that they all have in common that we can look at and say, oh yeah, that's not a bird because it doesn't have this or that, right? So let's form our little checklist now. What are something that these birds have? Well, first thing that comes to mind is usually like the skin or the outside layer of an animal, right? Because things like reptiles, like snakes and lizards, they have, what do they have? What kind of skin do they have? Scales. Yeah, they have scales, right? Like little plates of armor covering their body. Now, do our birds have scales? No, not really. What about fur? Do you know what kind of animals have fur? Have you ever heard of mammals? So things like dogs, cats, lions, cheetahs, and even us. We humans, we are mammals as well because we have hair, right? But hair or fur, does this one have fur? Do birds have fur? It might look pretty fuzzy. We're getting a little bit closer, but no, the things on their body are not fur. So what do birds have on their body? I hope that you're saying that they have feathers. Yes, because penguins and all birds really have feathers. And a penguin's feathers specifically are really, really important because, you didn't see in that video, but let's see if we can pull up a video. I'll come off screen and let's see if we have a video of some penguins swimming, because that's when we can really see those penguin feathers at their full potential. Now check this out. Look at the way that these penguins are able to swim in the water. And it really doesn't even always look like they're swimming. It kind of just looks like they're gliding sometimes, right? And then you can see that they use those flippers to kind of propel or push themselves, give them like one good push, and then their shape of their body helps them shoot through the water like a torpedo. But another thing that's actually really, really helping them is, well, those feathers. And you can even see something really cool that's happening. Let's see when I see it. But all of those little tiny bubbles that are coming too. All of those little bubbles, if you look closely, kind of come out of their backs, right? It's coming from their feathers. And that's because of the way that their feathers work. Now, a penguin's feathers, now this isn't true about all birds. penguins are pretty special in this way because they actually have more feathers on their body than almost any other type of bird, right? Because not all birds need that many feathers all closely packed together because not all birds are hanging out in the cold ocean, right? And so you can think about it, most of the time when we think of penguins, I think that most of you might be thinking of penguins living in like Antarctica or somewhere really snowy and cold. And there are some penguins that do live in those cold areas or in those snowy areas. But actually, most penguins actually just live on like rocky coasts. So they'll always be next to the ocean or to the water. But they're actually not all going to be living in snowy places. Some of them might actually be living in nice little beaches. So this is a great example. These are the types of penguins that we have here at the aquarium. They're called Magellanic penguins, and they're from a part of the world from the country near the countries of Peru and Chile in South America. And you can see, do you see any snow anywhere? Not really. And yeah, sometimes during the year, these parts of the country can get snow, but it's not like it's Antarctica all year long where it's snowy. And actually, some penguins actually also live in places like parts of Africa. I think we might have a map. Nice. So when we think of penguins, you're probably thinking of the ones that live down here. Things like our emperor and our king penguins. If you're a fan of some popular penguin movies, those are usually the ones that you see. But most of the rest of the penguins, those are only like 2 species. But the rest of the penguins will live in these kind of tropical places. So you can see like Australia, southern Australia right there. And then that southern part of Africa, that's where you're going to find those African penguins. And then the Magellanic penguins, the ones that we have here at the aquarium, that we were kind of looking at that picture of them at the beach and the ones that were swimming, they live right around here. Right there along Peru and Chile. So they live on the southern part of the world. So like we call that the southern hemisphere. It just means that if you split the map in the middle, instead of going up to the top, they live down south. So it can usually be pretty warm, but also the water gets pretty cold. So going back to the idea of our penguins and their feathers, we can actually go to my document camera. That's what I call my handy dandy camera here that lets me kind of show you guys some interesting things. So hi, I'm still here. And let me work on zooming this out. Well, I actually have a jar of some penguin feathers here. Because, well, we have penguins here at the aquarium. And penguins, they actually drop their feathers or kind of like shed their feathers the same way that a dog or a cat sheds its fur. So we can actually see a lot of these feathers. Now, the feathers that you're seeing here, they may not look like those, you may not think that they're penguin feathers, right? Because they're not all black or white. They're kind of this soft gray and they're kind of small. But that's because penguins actually have multiple layers of feathers, and that's part of how they keep themselves warm in the water. So they have one layer of feathers on the top. Let's see if we can pull up a picture of a penguin, and so I can point that out. Good. So on this penguin here, this is one of those Magellanic penguins, like the ones we have here at the aquarium. But these ones here, all these black and white, these are bigger feathers. They're a little bit denser, so like a little bit thicker. And they live on the topmost layer, or the outside layer of the penguin's body. And these feathers, their job is pretty much to just keep out the water. So they actually repel water. And so part of how they do that is, one, just the way that they lay on the penguin's body. So they kind of make like a waterproof layer. Oh, this is a really cool photo that we have here. You can see the way that they lay down. And when you look closely, like this closely, you kind of start to see they almost look like maybe like if you've ever worn like a rain jacket, sometimes like really nice ones will have these kinds of patterns in them, or the way that they like weave or sew the jackets together. Sometimes companies that do that, they actually look at the way that things like penguin feathers, or even things like shark scales too, we look at the way that animals' furs, feathers, and scales uh, actually connect, because they are some of the best things in nature. Like, they naturally repel water and help the animals swim through the water. So that's one way that they do it. Another way that they do it is, or one of the other things that helps them repel that water with these feathers on the outside, is they actually have a special little oil that they make themselves. Now, I don't know if we have any young cooks in the or in the video here watching, but oil and water do not really mix. So normally, oil and water will separate. Now, I'm not going to go into the science of that because, well, that's not my favorite thing to do. But all you need to know is that water, or oil, pushes away water. And so when these birds, they actually make their own oil. We actually do too. If you've ever felt kind of like you had oily skin, or maybe like a little, I don't know, I want to say slippery, but that doesn't feel right. But we do have natural oils that come out of our pores on our body. But penguins, they also have some. And theirs actually comes right by their tail. And so that's actually why in the video that we saw earlier in those highlights, remember when I said, why are these penguins like scratching by their tail and then rubbing their feathers? Are they really itchy? Do they have allergies? Right? These ones here, they're actually, part of it is, yeah, they're just kind of grooming their feathers. So they're organizing their feathers so that they lay down nice and tight so that they don't get any water inside. But another part is they're actually rubbing some of that oil that they make onto their beak. And then when they go and groom themselves, or when they, when they kind of like rub their feathers along their back or along their fins and all that, well, that's them rubbing that oil kind of across those feathers to help them stay nice and waterproof. So that's actually a really, really cool adaptation that these animals have. But then if we go back to my document camera, the layer that they have underneath those feathers are more like these feathers here. And what do you think? How do they look different? We spent a good amount of time looking at those top feathers. So what do you think? Do you notice any similarities, any differences? Remember, you can text that number there, 562-286-1838, if you have any questions, or if you want to participate in giving me an answer. But some of the things that I'm noticing are, one, the color's a little bit different, right? So these ones aren't used for camouflage because they're not on the outside, so they don't need to have as consistent of a color, right? That black and white pattern that penguins have, that is a type of camouflage that helps them kind of hide from predators. And so it's important that their feathers match those colors. But the ones underneath, no one's really seeing most of the time. So they are these more kind of gray, pale colors. And the thing I'm really, really noticing is they look a lot fuzzier, right? So they look way more like poofy, a lot more fluffy than those top feathers do. And that's because if the job of the top feathers was to just keep the water out, the job of these feathers here are to keep that penguin nice and warm. These are the ones like another animal's like fur that helps keep them warm. Okay? And so one layer keeps water out, the other layer kind of traps air and warms that air up so that the skin underneath all of those feathers stays nice and toasty and never even has to worry about the water, the cold water. And that's also why, if you remember that video of the penguin swimming, remember I pointed out those bubbles? Well, that's why I pointed out those bubbles, because it's connected to their feathers. Because those little tiny bubbles that you saw coming off of their backs, right? Like, why would bubbles be coming out of an animal's back? That doesn't really make any sense. It's not like they're blowing bubbles, right? But it's because of all those little bits of air that they trapped in their feathers to help keep them waterproof and help keep them warm, right? So I think that's pretty awesome. Let's see if we can see it happening. Now that we know a little bit more about how these penguin feathers work, let's see. Nice. Do you guys see it? Yeah. And it is weird to see at first. Like, it's just these random bubbles coming off of an animal's back. That's kind of strange. But the more you understand it, the more that it makes, or the more that you learn about the animal, the more you understand why this is happening, right? And like I said, there's humans, like scientists that are working on things like designing wetsuits for humans so that we can go in the water, like dive in the water in really cold water. And they look at things like this. They look at the way that penguin feathers work, or the way that things like otters' fur work, right? And that's how things like dry suits work. They make 2 layers, and it's based off of these animals, based on nature, which is really awesome to see. Okay, well, we've spent a lot of time talking about these penguins, but we're not just talking about penguins today. We're talking about birds, right? So with our last bit of time, I do want to start to kind of connect these things to other birds. So we saw that penguins have feathers, right? So that's something that all these birds share. Another thing that all birds share is where they hatch from. Where do birds hatch from? Where do they come from? Right? So that's another way that we can determine if an animal is a bird or not, because all birds come from, they should come from eggs. So you can see one of the Magellanic penguins. I believe this is one of ours too, because I could kind of tell because they have the little color wristbands, and that's how we tell our penguins apart. But you'd see they're laying on an egg there, and those are a better picture of those penguin eggs. Good. So all birds are going to lay eggs. They're going to have feathers. And the last thing that kind of connects them is that they're warm-blooded animals. That means that they can regulate their own body temperature. Now, we won't get too much into what that means, but we are also warm-blooded animals. So you can see, and so are mammals. Mammals are warm-blooded animals, but they don't have feathers, and they don't lay eggs. So it's okay to have some overlap. It's okay for us to share something with another animal, but you have to you have to check all the boxes in order to make sure an animal is in that kind of group. But good. So let's see, Lynette, I'm going to ask you to put up a picture of another bird. Maybe not a penguin, some other kind of bird, and we'll spend the last bit of our time kind of comparing them so that we can see what some differences between birds. Nice. Okay, I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds to just make some observations and focus on what you see as the same versus what is different between the penguin and this bird here. And then I'll come back in and tell you what it is. And if you know what it is, even better, text that in, okay? I want to see who there at home is a bird expert. All right, everyone, what do you think? First off, did anyone know what kind of bird this is? I'll give you a hint. Well, I'll point out a hint, better said. These legs, these tall, long legs, are part of the name. So this is called a black-necked stilt. And so those legs, if you ever heard of stilts, have you ever seen like a circus performer or someone on those big, like long sticks, like they're standing on those big sticks that make them super, super tall? Those are called stilts. So that is where this bird gets that name, because it has those long legs. Now, it's not, it's not sitting on long pieces of wood or anything. Its legs are just naturally that long. And that, too, is an adaptation. So this bird is going to look very different, for one, from the penguins in a lot of ways, but there are some similarities, right? Now, the first one that I'm seeing is that color, right? That black top and that white underbelly. That's pretty close to that penguin pattern, right? So they do share a type of camouflage, right? We call that counter shading. So it means they have one color on top and another color on bottom. And what else? Well, feathers, right? they share feathers because they're both birds. They're warm-blooded. We can't really see that in this picture, but just know they are warm-blooded. And we also don't see any eggs, but these stilts do lay eggs. So they are definitely a bird. But let's look at some of those differences, because I think the differences in animals, or even just in general, the differences between things kind of is more interesting than the similarities. Because it's really cool to see how the same type of animal can still be different, and yet they've just found ways to adapt, right? That's the key word, to adapt. That means to change to your environment so that you survive in your environment better. So these birds, these stilts, they're not going to be living in areas where the penguins are, most likely. They're not going to be living on those kind of coastal edges, so near the ocean. They are a little bit more like, we call them wetland birds. So you can see that black-necked stilt right there. This one looks like a little, yeah, this one looks like a little one. But you see the one that we were noticing at in the back there. They're so cute. And so looking at those legs, you can even see in the environment too. They're going to be living in more kind of shore areas, like wetland areas, where they might be maybe closer to like fresh water. And you're going to see a lot of these kinds of grassy patches there. And so because of that, well, their long legs, they might be near things like ponds. And in that photo, you could kind of see that pond in the background that we made. Now, that was one of our birds that we have here at the aquarium, so it was their habitat, and I think this one is too. You can see that kind of pond that we made and their food laid out there for them, right? But those long legs are an adaptation that help them be able to walk through those ponds or those water, just like this one is doing here, right? It helps them look at how much of their foot is actually in the water versus how much is out of the water. So that's an adaptation. Because they live in these areas, they are adapted to have legs that keep them far out of that water and up above, because that's where they're going to be looking for their food. And speaking of food, a really important thing when it comes to looking at what animal or looking at birds is we want to look at their beaks, because their beaks can tell us a lot about them. Because the beak of a bird will tell us what kind of thing they eat. And if you know what kind of thing they eat, then you'll know where they live usually, because you know where they're going to find, or places where they can find their food source. And so this long, skinny beak, what that's good for eating, or how that's good for eating, better said, is they will kind of pick that beak into little bits of dirt or little bits of mud right along where the water will meet some of those land parts, right where little larvae or like little bugs like to bury themselves right under the dirt or that sand. And so that beak is kind of like a long, narrow little straw, right? They poke it in, and then they're able to pull out things like worms or larvae, which is what we call like most baby bugs. And so their legs and their beaks help them do that, because their legs keep them nice up and high so they can kind of look at everything below them. But then their beak, it's like chopsticks, or like a very precise little fork. It helps them, boop, just pinch and pick up whatever animals they see. And those skinny little pointy ends too helps them just dig just a little bit into the ground so that they can pull out those animals. Okay. Well, that looks like it will take us to the end of our time. So I'll go ahead, I'll come back on camera here. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us here today. We do have another program. I will actually be here for that one as well. It'll start at 10 o'clock, so in about 30 minutes. And that program is going to be in Spanish. So it'll be entirely in Spanish. So if you have friends or family who you think might enjoy that, you could always send them that link. But otherwise, we'll also be here. We're here almost every Tuesday. So until next time, thank you for joining us here at our Aquarium Online Academy. Again, my name is Sergio. My friend Lynette joined us. Thank you again to her. And the Aquarium thanks you for your time. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye.